Well, hold on one second.
No problem. We
And
can,
then I'll introduce you, Elisa.
yes, don't forget. So I'm gonna let you guys go ahead and I'll be here and I'll pop in if we need anything.
Hold on one second. I'm just trying to take the participant screen off real quick. Excuse me one second. Let me take that.
It can be really annoying. What I usually do is just like stick it up in the top right-hand corner out of my.
Yeah, I'm taking it off completely. It's just when I'm on a split screen,
Mm-hmm.
I got to get my mouse in the right direction.
So is it on?
Sure.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
All
Hi
right.
there. Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you to Cornell Cooperative's new and beginning farmer series. Tonight we have Elisa Ross, who is a beekeeper and a master gardener. She's a longtime master gardener, and I think 5 years is a long time to be a beekeeper. So I'm very proud to have her here. She's a great teacher. And so we're going to start with her presentation, Better Pollination and Better Farming. So this is Elisa Ross. Elisa.
Hi, and welcome to the class. I feel like I need to give you a disclaimer first. I am a much better gardener than I am computer person, and I have no true experience with the Zoom program. And so you will forgive me, I am seated versus standing. And so I am looking down at my notes versus standing at a lectern where you would see me face to face. So bear with me looking down, but I do want to welcome you to the class. I do expect that you will learn a lot. I have been keeping a garden and keeping bees for a number of years. I thought I knew all it was to know about pollination, and I found myself very pleasantly surprised to realize I did not. So I really hope that you gain from this class knowledge that I gained when I did the research. So let me first tell you what I actually think farming is. Farming, be it large or small property, is actually focused gardening. You start with an idea, you revise it, you brood on it. If you're me, you brood on it a lot. You play with it, you brood about it, you refine it, you ultimately define it, and then you make a final design. You create a goal and a plan. For some, a farm or focused garden is actually a labor of love. You're expanding your garden, you're creating a focused gardening area as a labor of love. You just want increased crops to feed your family, or to donate to a community food bank, or you want to grow an abundance of flowers to always have cut flowers in your home. Whatever your motivation, it is not considered a business. For others, it is that business, and your goal after refining, brooding, and planning is to make your farm viable and financially stable to provide you with an income. Historically, however, farm margins are scarce. You must thus maximize your use of the land and capital to generate increased income. Whatever type of focused garden / farm you have, it will not, and I'll stress it again, it will not be successful without a successful pollination program, a flourishing pollination program. And a flourishing pollination program, by definition, requires a diversity of bees or diversity of pollinators. Pollinators in our community include moths, butterflies, bats, hummingbirds, wasps, mosquitoes, but the key pollinator is the bee. All bees have two main requirements. They require food, which would be pollen, which is the protein, and nectar, which is a carbohydrate, and they require shelter. These are two main things that they require for survival. A successful farm will utilize a diversity of bee types. These include solitary bees and managed bees. In my opinion, it is crucial to have a diversity of bee types for multiple reasons. They will stabilize pollination services over time. The more species in an area, the more likely one will adapt to changes in that area, and thus you will have survival of the species and continued pollination. In addition, should there be a catastrophe, i.e. mites attack or pestilence or a predator, one of the species that you have will surely learn to adapt to this, and again, your pollination will continue and you will have survival of your successful farm or focused garden. The first bee I want to describe is a solitary bee. By its very name, you realize that it lives alone. There are 400 native bee species that are solitary in our area. Like native plants, which you are encouraged to plant in your focused garden or farm, they are ideally suited to our local landscape and to our weather patterns. 75% of the solitary bees are ground nesters. 25% live above ground. They are unique in comparison to bumblebees or honeybees in that they have no hive, they do not swarm, and they do not create honey. They live a solitary existence. I'm going to show you a picture of a solitary nest. My better half is managing our pictures. Can you go back to the commercial one? Thank you. These are solitary, commercially made, commercially sold, solitary bee houses. You will notice there are tubes of varying sizes. The most popular size is the size on the right on my screen in what looks like a flower. These tubes are about the size and width of a number 2 unsharpened pencil. You want these tubes to be at least 6 inches long. That's really a very, very crucial point. If when you want to go buy something like this to put up in your orchard or in your farm, you take out the tube, they're easily removed. If that tube is not at least 6 inches long, think of an unsharpened number 2 pencil, do not buy it. It will not be successful. You will not have a population of solitary bees. It has to be that long because the queen lays eggs, which I will describe that technique in a second, but she lays eggs in this tube and it must have at least 2 inches of unoccupied space at the end. That's because if a predator does locate this nest and tries to enter one of the tubes, it has to penetrate at least 2 inches before it reaches an egg. Most predators are too big and can't enter a tube that's properly sized that 2-inch depth and such that it will ensure the success of the nest. So these are two types sold. One has varying sizes, one is larger. There are different types of solitary bees. I'm just going to touch on a couple because it's likely that you will utilize these in your garden. In our area, we have the blue orchard mason bee, we have the leaf cutter bee, we have the leaf miner bee, we have a sweat bee, we have an emerald colored bee called the emerald bee, and we have a naturalized bee called the horn-faced bee. Really very cute looking with actual horns. These solitary bees are very, very efficient for a simple reason. They live only 4 to 7 weeks. Within the time period of 4 to 7 weeks, they have to emerge, the queen has to emerge from her nest. She has to gather a food supply and gather fat on her own body that will enable her to make eggs. Then she has to lay the eggs, protect the eggs, and then she dies. The eggs hibernate over winter and a new queen emerges in the spring. But this process takes place in these types of tubes. Now, these tubes don't have to be these commercial tubes. They can be a naturalized area in the ground, which I'll show you in a minute. You can take groups of these tubes and nests and show this. Here's one in an orchard. So a farmer took a number of different and varying solitary, commercially made or homemade solitary bee nests. They were put in a frame. The frame is protected by a wire, so marauding animals, i.e. mice or raccoons in particular, can't attack the hive or the house, I should say. And then it is placed on sturdy poles above the ground. You can have a number of these homes clustered together like this because the bees do not compete with each other. They are solitary. What's required for their survival is a clean water source, a muddy area near that water so that the bee can gather mud to protect her egg. So the bee will create an egg. She'll go into that tube to the very end of that tube. She'll lay her egg, and then she will make a pellet of combined nectar and pollen and mud and block off that egg. Then she'll lay another egg and block it off and fill that tube up within 2 inches of the end with all her eggs and fill a nest that way. She will not compete with other bees. She will not sting you because she's not trying to protect a colony. She's only concentrating on creating her own nesting area. Solitary bees, in order to gather their own food, are wonderful pollinators for fruit trees. So if you are a farm in our area that grows apricots, pears, apples, blueberries, cherries, peaches, strawberries, or various flowers, these are the pollinators you want to encourage to come to your property. Solitary bees are unlike most other bees in that they will fly in cloudy skies and in lower temperatures. Again, this is because they are accustomed to our climate. They are not brought in. They are not from Europe as our honeybees. They are local. They are like having a native plant that's accustomed to our area. They are ideally suited to our area. If you put up a if you put up a solitary bee house, it has to be open like you see in the picture, so it's accessible for the solitary bee. What is important is that the solitary bee doesn't venture very far from this nest. It will only travel about 300 feet from its food source. It likes to face in the southeast direction. If you're putting up a commercially or homemade nests, like I show here in the picture, you want it protected from midday sunlight. You want it also protected from the rain, because if direct rain hits those nesting holes, it makes it difficult, if not impossible, depending on the strength of the rain, for the solitary bee to enter and exit. You want to provide a natural habitat, and I'm going to show you a ground. This is a perfect habitat for any number of bees. I'm actually going to show you this picture a number of times because it is your ideal bee habitat. It has hollow tubes for different bees to nest in. It has cracks in the ground around the rocks for solitary bees to nest in. It has some tree branches in the background, loose gravel and soil for them to nest in, all things important for the success of a pollinator solitary bee. The next bee I want to discuss with you is called a managed bee. Like the solitary bee, it is a generalist bee in that it is not particular as to what it pollinates within a large group of types of fruit and vegetables and flowers. The honeybee was brought to the United States. Oh, here's pictures of hives. That's perfect. The honeybee was brought to the United States 400 years ago. It is the most widely used commercial pollinator in the United States. There's a reason for this. It is easily managed. While these look very tall, and they are, as the hive increases in number, you add a box. Each box contains frames, and it can get ever taller depending on how many bees you have in your hive, how successful your hive is. A honeybee hive can have up to 60,000 bees. Compare that to a solitary bee, which is solitary. Compare that to the next bee I'll discuss, which will have maximum 300 bees in its hive. So a honeybee, because it's such a huge colony, is very protective of that hive. You'll want to wear a bee outfit when maintaining this hive. It does require work. You will normally see at the bottom of this hive, you'll see an opening on each hive. You'll see swarms of bees going in and out. Think 50 to 60,000 bees entering and exiting that hive to provide food for all the eggs that the queen is laying inside of this hive, and for creating honey to provide food for the bees over winter. There is a big problem with commercial honeybees, however, in that there is a problem called colony collapse disorder, or CCD. Colonies of bees are dying. The supplies are dwindling. Colony collapse disorder, CCD, is caused by a number of factors, we believe. Research is ongoing to determine the exact source of the problem, but the result is absolutely apparent. Hives are dying. We believe it is possibly caused by mites, possibly caused by climate change, but the final outcome of CCD is the scarcity of honeybees. You, as a focused gardener, as a farmer, must have a diversity of pollinating animals, i.e. bees, in order to have a successful garden. You cannot rely entirely on honeybees. Now, honeybee normally is brought to your orchard by a commercial honeybee keeper. You will determine how many hives you need to successfully pollinate your area. Honeybees can travel up to 3 miles. So if your garden isn't necessarily 3 miles in diameter, they're going to venture away and find alternate sources of pollination and bring back that pollen and nectar to your garden, thus being efficient in cross-pollination, which is very important. In this hive world, as I said, the hives are leased and transported to your garden. When they finish pollinating your garden, these hives are then transported to another garden where a different crop is then about to bloom. This transportation of hives can prove to be stressful for honeybees. You have to only hope that when the leasee brings your hives to your, when the lessor, brings the hives to your property, that they're strong hives and that they have not been stressed by the trip to your farm. Because that could be actually a problem, again, I'm going to stress, you need a diversity of bees. The hive will increase in strength as it stays on your property, as it acclimates to your crop, but initially it may be struggling. You have to be aware of that and account for that and have alternate sources of pollination while they establish themselves. Honeybees are very aggressive defenders of their hives. Their stinger is not barbed, meaning once they sting you, I'm sorry, I'll take it back. Their stinger is barbed, forgive me. Once they sting you, the sting breaks off into your skin and the honeybee will die. To prevent this, I suggest wearing leather gloves up to your elbows, as well as a protective bee suit. You want to be calm as you approach the beehive. You can use a smoker to make them drowsy so that you can approach the hive and maintain it. They need to be checked routinely for any critters inside, a mice that could have gotten in, the necessity for addition of a box. All these things you will determine as you check on your hives. If you've leased the hives, whatever contractual arrangement you've made with the lessor will determine the amount of maintenance you personally have to put into the hive. It may be that you don't have to at all, and the lessor will come and maintain your hive. It may be that the lease arrangement you made requires you to maintain the hive. In order, you will know that you've gotten a new hive each year because the queen is actually marked with a colorful dot, and that dot changes color each year. You will learn when you buy your hive or lease your hive what that year's color is. When you check on your hive, you will see the queen and you'll be able to determine that you have a newly hatched queen who will establish a new hive. So honeybees are most active on warm and sunny days. Compare this to a solitary bee that will be active in pollinating on a cloudy and cool day. They are not active in poor weather. They are very efficient because, keep in mind, again, you have 50,000 bees. You need to protect these 50,000 bees. In this picture, you can see a little bit in the background that we have an electric fence around this hive using electric wires. A bear is your most common predator for getting through. You can have a fisher cat also try to get to your hives, but a bear is the most likely predator in our area. The electric fence is a deterrent. It's not the do-all to end-all. So be aware that you still have to have your hives in an area that you can try to protect. If you have a huge, vast farm and your hives are in the center of the farm, more than likely a bear is not going to venture all the way through your acreage to get to your hives. If you have a small farm, that indeed could be an issue. So just be aware of that fact. Now, the next managed bee, which I found fascinating, is the bumblebee. I've been gardening as a master gardener for a number of years. I've truly enjoyed watching bees foraging in my garden. The buzzing bumblebee is the most adorable to me. It's a clumsy flyer as compared to the honeybee. It's got a lot more hair on its body as compared to a honeybee. And I like to hear the buzzing as I'm in my flowers. It just reminds me of nature at its best. I never thought of managing bumblebees as a pollinator, but some very clever person did. So this is a commercial bumblebee hive. You will notice that it's considerably smaller than a honeybee hive. Bumblebees are not nearly as aggressive as a honeybee, and they're much, much more efficient pollinators because of their clumsy way of flying and because of the hairs all over their body. So a usual bumblebee hive, such as this one, will contain 50 to 300 bees. Compare that to 50 to 60,000 of honeybees or a solitary bee. They have a lifespan of 6 to 12 weeks. It's not a very long lifespan, so they also have to be efficient pollinators and hive creators with their young to lay eggs in a short period of time. They pollinate from February through November. What's completely unique with the bumblebee as a managed pollinator versus just bouncing around your garden is that they can be placed in a greenhouse. So if your managed farm or if your focused garden is completely made up of greenhouses, this is the ideal pollinator for you. They can adjust to UV light that diffuses through the greenhouse walls, be it glass or the plastic. It's just an astounding fact. It's amazing fact. So because they can adjust for UV light, they can easily see the flowers that they need to pollinate. They can easily see their way back to the hive. In cloudy weather, diffusing light through a greenhouse, which could make it dim and dark inside, even if you have grow lights, or outside in your garden in the sunlight. They adapt to both light spectrums. Very amazing. The commercial advantages of this bumblebee is that not only is it successfully used in greenhouses, but it pollinates a vast variety of plants. It's superb for pollinating tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, berries, squash. And in order to do this pollination, it can actually move its wings like a helicopter does. Not necessarily as a bee does up and down. It can swivel them sideways or sweep them. They can approach a flower that's not exactly open and use their wings to vibrate the petals in such a way that they can reach the pollen with their tongue and thus obtain nectar and pollen and pollinate that plant. In addition, they have an intelligence within their hive, like a hive collective, and they leave a scent on a flower that they have just pollinated so that the next bumblebee coming around knows that the pollen or nectar has been depleted. They don't waste their energy trying to find it on that flower, and they'll go to the next one. In the bee world, that is unique. The bee female uses her smell in addition to smelling flowers for depletion to find the proper site for her nest. She uses both her sense of smell and sight to find her ideal spot. She wants the nest to be, and I'm going to show you the next picture now, on a stable surface. This is a homemade bumblebee nest affixed to a tree trunk. Note that it has protection from the rain. It is using a band to affix it tightly to the tree. And because the bumblebee hive is only 300 bees max, usually, it has only one small opening for the bees to enter and exit. It doesn't need a tray open on the bottom for up to 50,000 bees like a honeybee to enter or exit. It's not a solitary bee that has tiny little holes. It just has the one hole for their 50 to 300 bees to come and go as they see fit. They can travel approximately 1 mile to get their food. So if your farm or managed farm or focused garden is within that framework of size, they're not going to leave your area. If your focused garden is smaller than that, they will venture away, but not too far. And then they come back to this firmly affixed hive where they will then feed their young. They do not create honey. They do not have a huge hive that they have to protect so that they are not nearly as aggressive as the honeybee. Their barb is smooth so that when they sting you, they can do it multiple times. So if you disturb this hive and if you aggravate the bees, and it takes quite a bit to aggravate a bumblebee, it takes a real threat to this hive or a real perceived threat for them to believe that you are attacking this hive, for them to become aggressive, they can and will sting you multiple times. If you have a hive that you notice is seeming to be particularly aggressive in protecting its young, its hive, I would suggest again that you wear the bee outfit with the gloves that are leather up to your elbows. They're not particularly aggressive when they forage. So if you have a swath of wildflowers that you like to walk through to cut for your home, and there are bumblebees pollinating in there, that really won't bother them. They aren't going to sting you. If you disturb their hive, that's another story. Compare that to honeybees who, while pollinating, if they perceive an aggression, they will sting you. The bumblebee's life cycle is quite interesting, I find. The queen builds up fat in her body so that she can lay the eggs and have the strength to do that while foraging for herself. She builds up her fat. She lays eggs in the hive. She's tended to by workers. Then she dies. The rest of the bees die. The entire hive dies, except for the eggs. Come spring, the new bumblebee queen emerges and the cycle begins again. Again, compare this to a solitary bee that lays the eggs alone. She dies. The new queen emerges in the springtime from that tube, be it a commercially made tube or a crack in the ground or a stem. And each one emerges. Some may be male, some may be female, but that queen then emerges and starts a new solitary site of nesting. I found it fascinating to learn about the 3 different types of bees that could be pollinating your gardens and doing all of that very successfully. So I'm going to show you a picture now of here it is. This is a commercial or homemade bumblebee hive that is under the ground. So farmer, has actually dug under the garden to place the beehive there as an alternative to placing it on a tree trunk, as this is. When you put it under the ground, you provide them with additional shelter. The weight of the earth provides a deafening atmosphere. It's calmer for the bumblebee. You can do it that way. To me personally, this involves a lot more work, but some bumblebees are happier this way. It's not commonly done, but you can try it. I would try various methods of managing your bumblebees. This is another one. So now you know the 3 types of bees that I would recommend that you have in your garden, in your focused farm, but know that it's not all easy. It takes work, it takes effort, and there are definite problems that the bees can experience, most of them caused by us, whether well-intentioned or not. Humans are the number 1 enemy of any type of bees. We, unfortunately, in my mind, use pesticides and herbicides in our gardens. So if you find it necessary to use either one, a pesticide or an herbicide, I'm going to request that you do the following. First, read the product label carefully. Make every effort to purchase one that suits your specific crop. and that is as environmentally friendly as possible. Secondly, you want to make sure to use that herbicide or pesticide at dusk. This is crucial. In fact, some herbicides and pesticides actually have that warning on their labels and request that you pollinate, that you, excuse me, or use them at night. That's because most pollinators are now back in their respective hives or houses by dusk. And that when you put down the herbicide or pesticide, they won't land in it. They won't then bring back that poison, which is what it is, back to their hive and possibly poison all of the bees in the hive, or put that poison on the food source and thus kill the entire hive. It's really very important, very important. If you find the need to use a pesticide or herbicide, please don't apply it on a windy, dusky night. You don't want it to blow beyond your prescribed, defined boundaries that you feel need the herbicide or pesticide. So if you have a prescribed, defined area, make sure you're not using any more of the pesticide or herbicide that you need for that specific area. Apply it at dusk and make sure it's not windy. You really don't want it to drift. And not only for your own crop, but should you border another home or another property, you want to be a courteous neighbor and you don't want your pesticide to blow onto their property or to be incorporated into the ground and have groundwater spread it to their property. You want to be as courteous as possible to your neighbors and to our environment. So I want you to define pollinator risk zones, i.e. where your pollinators are nesting. If you know that you have a managed bumblebee farm in the ground, I don't want you to use pesticides or herbicides at any time near that hive. So when you place a hive, you have to think about that if you're going to place a hive underground, you have to know that you're not going to need a pesticide or herbicide in that area. It's very important. You want to make sure, please, that you use a pesticide that's suitable for what you're trying to eradicate. So if you have crabgrass, for example, that you really for some reason don't want in that area, please make sure that you're going to use the proper product to address that problem. Unlike a generalist bee that can pollinate everything, pesticides and herbicides are not generalists. They're not used for multiple reasons. They are specific. Make sure you use a specific one for your specific issue. Again, the other various problems that a bee can experience can be diseases. Multiple diseases attack any number of different types of bees, the solitary bees, the managed bees of honeybees or bumblebees. Educate yourself. I'm not going to go into detail now. I lack the time. But should you decide to have any type of these bees managed on your property, you should learn the various diseases and know what you can do once you recognize them. Honeybees are particularly susceptible to mites. When you check those hives or when your lessor checks those hives, make sure that they check for mites. And ants are a terrible predator for beehives of multiple types. You have ways to prevent this. If you think you're going to experience ant predation, you can buy sticky tape, which most garden stores sell, and you put it around the base of your hives and around the top area of your hives. So should any ants fall from a tree onto your hive, or should any ants try to climb up from the bottom to your hive, they will land on the sticky tape and not be able to enter your hive. Or you can create a water moat at the bottom of your hive, similar to a saucer on the bottom of a plant or the saucer on the bottom of a hummingbird feeder, so that the ants will drown if they try to enter the hive. You unfortunately cannot put a moat at the top of a hive, but you can also put a barrier. If it's hanging from a tree, you can put a baffle, the same type you would use for protect from squirrels on a bird nest or a bird house. And any predator would have to get over that baffle. So it's just another barrier. If it's a predator like a bear, it's really not going to prove to be much of a hindrance, since bears can get through whatever bears want to get through. but bees and other ants and mites would have to travel over the baffle and then under and then first reach the hive. It's a lot of effort. You would recognize them, you would see them on that baffle by that point, and you would take measures to eradicate them. There are parasites that will attack your bees. That's not a lot you can do to prevent that. You just have to be aware of it. Should you see wasps nesting near your bees, I would take measures to eradicate those wasps. Being very careful not to use a pesticide to do it that can harm your bees. Very, very important. So to encourage your bees and to provide a food source for them, you should plant flowers such as these that bloom all 3 seasons, spring, summer, and fall. That is crucial. So if you are a focused farmer that is having a focused garden of wildflowers, if you want to have a wildflower business or a cut flower business, you would automatically be planting seeds like this because you want to have your business flourish spring, summer, and fall. Well, you want your bees to flourish spring, summer, and fall, and you have to provide food for them spring, summer, and fall. This type of seed does that. You would be able to buy this seed at any garden store. This is just 2 examples. Jonathan Green sells a mix of wild pollinator mix. A number of seed companies, Hudson Valley Seed Supply, which is a local seed company in our area, sells pollinator mixes. You have your choice. You can, in your own focused farm, if you want it as a decorative yet necessary feature, plant it as almost what you would think of a hedgerow. Surround your focused farm area with a 3-season wildflower mix. It's beautiful, it's lovely, and it feeds your pollinators. You can plant, as I said, a meadow of wildflower pollinator mix, but something like this, using native pollinators, is beneficial to the bees enormously. In addition to pollinating your plants, be they blueberries, be they pears, be they apricots, they have an additional food source, providing diversity, providing for cross-pollination. However, please accept that you will have some plant damage when the butterfly and moth larvae, which are also pollinators, and the bees land on plants. They can poke little holes in your plants. That's to be expected. You need to provide also a clean water source for any of your bees, any type of bees, be that a bird bath with a stone placed in it so that the bees have a place to alight, be that a swimming pool that has an edge. Our neighbors used to call us and tell us our bees are swimming in their pool. Have your fallen bush area. Again, I'm going to show you that picture of the fallen brush there. Leave it alone. I can't stress enough how this is the perfect area for all types of bees, all 3 seasons. It provides them a place of shelter. It provides them a place of nesting, and it provides for a area where they can forage. Believe it or not, this isn't dead. It may look it now, but there is greenery in the back. There is an area for the bees to live and to flourish. In addition to this for your garden, bees are a wonderful way to engage consumers. You can stress to the people that are buying your flowers or buying your food products, your edibles, or even just for friends and neighbors, that you are an environmentalist. You are engaging with your consumer, you are engaging with your neighbor by telling them how you are very concerned with the environment, providing for homes for bees. There are different organizations that you can apply for membership for. Once you establish that you are a bee-friendly garden. One is called Bee-Friendly Farming Partner. You fill out paperwork, they actually send someone to your garden to audit it to make sure that you meet their criteria. You get signage, and you are able to put on your website or on your advertising or on your front door that you are a bee-friendly partner. And this will definitely make you more appealing to a consumer that is environmentally aware. Keep in mind, if you are the farmer operating your farm as a business, that your goal is to be profitable. It is smart to engage your consumer and tell them that you work with the environment to produce the food or flowers that they are buying. There's also a government cost share program. Actually, there's a number of them that you can look on one of the handouts I've enclosed, and it has information there on how to apply for these programs. It's in the Wild Pollinators program handout, and you can apply. They have strict standards, but should you meet them, you are able to get funding for part of your garden, your focused farm, all of which will help defray your costs. So all of this, it just encourages our environment to flourish. You need the diversity of bees, solitary or managed, meaning honeybees or bumblebees, to have a successful garden. Any questions? I'm open to questions.
Yes, we do have some chat questions. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Okay, here's the first question. Do we need to clean out the tubes that the pollinators live in every year?
If you have your own pollinator, solitary pollinator house, such as the one that was pictured, yes, it's advisable, but not necessary. You don't necessarily have to do it. It is advisable. You want to take
Okay.
out, come wintertime, you can bring them in your home if you don't mind, and put them in your refrigerator. So they can
Really?
winter. Yes, you can really
My
put them in
wife
the
is going to
refrigerator.
love that.
Yes, you actually take them out. Come springtime, you would literally tip the tube and make sure that if there's any obviously dead eggs, you would discard them. Then you put the tubes back in that framework of the commercial or homemade solitary bee house and put it back outside.
Okay. Okay. Next question. You mentioned that these bees use mud to reproduce, and you mentioned you can provide them with that. How do you provide these pollinators with mud?
If you have it placed properly near a clean water source, on the ground near that clean water source is usually dirt, mud. It gets wet from the clean water source. Or if you have it near a stream or a cistern or even a dripping sprinkler, the ground becomes somewhat muddy. They combine that mud with pollen and nectar and create a food source as well as a safety barrier for those eggs.
Okay, cool. So would it be helpful to have like a little pan or a bowl of mud
No.
or dirt? Okay,
No.
great. Next question. Are there any bees that aren't compatible? Like, would we be raising predators with our prey accidentally out there?
No. All bees, especially the solitary bees, work as a single unit. They're really oblivious to other bees. The honeybees work within their hive. You saw our picture with any number of hives. They worked as independent hives. One did not compete with the other. They are independent entities. And the managed bumblebee hives, you don't need many because there's such efficient pollinators. You can have one hive in your garden and that's sufficient. So no, they don't compete with each other.
Great. I got two more for you. Oh, one more. I do want to say on a personal level, thank you for speaking about pesticides. We need to use them responsibly, and people, it's not something you need to be completely afraid of, in my opinion. Anyway, I just appreciate you telling everyone to read the label and use them as they're intended, because that's the best way to make some progress if you need to use them.
Right.
My last question I have here is, how long will it take to establish flower pots for food for them? So if I go out this year with my seeds and put them out there, will I have enough food for all my bees?
Ah, that's very interesting. I want you to look up something called winter sowing, SOWING.org. It's a really simplistic method of starting your seeds now, right now. If I have time, can I explain it to you very quickly? Do I have
time? Go for it.
Okay. So winter sowing means that you get a translucent or transparent container, at least 1 gallon in size. I use milk containers. You put drainage holes at the bottom, ventilation holes on the top, and you get rid of the lid. You saturate seed starting soil, and it must be seed starting soil because that's a very light, sterile mixture as compared to dense, porous potting soil. You wet it and you fill the bottom, you cut that gallon container near the top third, and you leave a portion so it can close, but you fill the bottom third of that container with the wet seed starting mixture and you sprinkle seeds on top.
Okay.
Now I would put out all seeds except tomatoes and maybe cucumbers. But you put the seeds in there, you cover it with a fine layer of the wet seed starting mixture. You seal that container back up and you put it outside.
Okay.
Right outside now in the winter weather with the snow, with the rain, with the frost, whatever it is. Come May, you will start to open that container and let it acclimate little by little to the weather. And by the end of May, when your ground is 60 degrees or warmer, at least 5 inches deep, when you open that up completely, you will have plants with true leaves at least 5 inches to 7 inches tall. You cut a slice down that container. It's very easy. And en masse, you lift those seedlings up and you put them
Wow.
in the ground, and you will thus have blooming flowers very early for your emerging bees.
Do you have a handout for that we can include for everybody?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a handout about that? Maybe we can include one for everybody.
I can get one for you and I'll send
Great.
it to you.
I've never heard of that. It's basically a mini cold frame. Is that right?
Exactly that. And it was actually developed by a woman who lives in Westchester, but it's a fascinating method to start your garden early. You can start.
And you don't need any supplemental light for that? It's okay, just.
Absolutely not. You put them
Okay.
outside. It's a really simplistic way. You can also have grow lights in the heat mat in your house and start seeds now, or in
Yeah.
a couple of weeks maybe. So you don't want them to get too thready or leggy trying to reach the light source. But there are any number of ways to start your pollinator friendly plants now so that they
Great.
wouldn't emerge. But, and I should have said this earlier, be more considerate, I guess is an easy way to say it, of your weeds, particularly dandelion and white clover, which will emerge
Yeah.
early.
They're
Those
great
are
food.
super friendly bee pollinator plants. And if you let them flourish now and over winter, come spring, they're the first things out, and you'll
Yeah.
have food for your pollinators. When your crocus emerge, they're the earliest ones, and your daffodils, you'll have really early food for your pollinators. It's a
Great.
really easy way to provide for them.
Awesome. That's all the questions I have on my end.
All right, thank you. This was lovely. Should you have any more questions, you can email Donna at Cornell and she will forward them to me and I will happily answer them and get back to you.
Great.
Thank you for attending my class. I enjoyed this very much.
Thank you, Elisa. I learned so much about bees. I really did. That was so interesting about the bumblebees.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I found it fascinating.
Very fascinating. It never occurred to me. So thank you very much. And I believe that we are recording and
Yes.
that this program will be available online in pretty soon. So you can check it out again if you want. Thank you, Elisa. You're just
Very welcome.
fabulous. Thank you.
Thank
Hold
you
on.
so
I'm going
much.
to stop. I just stopped the recording so you can talk now. That was great, Elise.